De'Aaron Fox, having moved on from Sacramento, has been a subject of trade discussions with various teams. However, reports indicate he has one particular team in mind as the trade deadline approaches. I've examined several potential trade scenarios in another video, but the prevailing narrative indicates that the San Antonio Spurs top De'Aaron Fox's preferred destinations, where he aims to team up with Victor Wembanyama. The buzz surrounding Wembanyama in San Antonio has intensified over the past few months, with players across the league acknowledging his extraordinary potential and anticipating his emergence as a leading figure in the league in the coming seasons. His two-way skill set suggests he may not dominate offensively, making him an ideal partner for perimeter players. There are certainly players around the league expressing their interest to their agents in joining San Antonio to play alongside Wembanyama. De'Aaron Fox is already taking steps in this direction, benefiting from a unique contract situation. As a 2026 free agent, he can effectively direct his future to the team of his choice by informing other teams, much like Sacramento, that he won't extend his contract with them. This allows him to maintain the option of leaving for free agency in 2026. San Antonio, naturally, stands out as a destination where he would be inclined to sign an extension when the time comes. Thus, Fox is in a distinctive position to facilitate this partnership. Alongside Y, and although this is unfortunate for Kings fans, I find it really intriguing that he's assessing this from a basketball standpoint. Usually, when trade requests emerge and players present a list of preferred destinations, it's typically larger market teams, or situations like Bradley Beal wanting to move to Phoenix or Jimmy Butler seeking Phoenix because they want to team up with certain players, even if those teams aren't top contenders. De'Aaron Fox is evaluating the landscape of the league and thinking, I don't have to go to Miami or Los Angeles or New York, but rather, I could play next to someone who might become the best player in the league in a couple of years. This perspective on trade requests, despite its downside for Kings fans, is quite fascinating. Now, Fox, as the lead guard in San Antonio, aligns perfectly with their current roster setup because, while Devin Vassell is really talented, he's primarily a wing scorer. Meanwhile, Scoot Henderson still has plenty of time to grow. They lack a lead guard perimeter scorer who can take control late in games and create in pick-and-roll scenarios with Victor Wembanyama. Integrating De'Aaron Fox into their mix would definitely give them a significant offensive lift and might even enhance Wemby's efficiency. That pairing in San Antonio would certainly be compelling to observe, as Fox generally aligns with the team's timeline. As he is currently in his prime, I would personally love to witness this occur, Fox and Wemby together in San Antonio. The Spurs undeniably possess the assets needed to facilitate this trade, contingent on Sacramento's desires, and it seems they are actively engaged in negotiations to finalize a deal. Previously, I discussed a trade package that would fundamentally comprise contracts and picks, with no young player assets returning to Sacramento. However, the Spurs have several future first-round picks that are not their own, enabling them to trade some of these selections so Sacramento can gain value while still retaining access to their own picks to further develop their team around Wemby and presumably Fox. There are additional contracts on the Spurs that could fit the scenario. Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes are the primary names frequently mentioned. Nevertheless, if I were the Spurs, I would prefer to keep CP3 and Harrison Barnes given the new structure of the roster, and I would be fine parting ways with players like Keldon Johnson, Zach Collins, and multiple first-round picks. It could even exceed the 4 picks I've mentioned in the trade, whatever is necessary to acquire De'Aaron Fox. However, if Sacramento wishes to leverage the situation further and request additional assets, it would likely involve acquiring a young player, which is where the Spurs may struggle. Sochan is a decent young talent, but I'm not willing to trade Devin Vassell or Malachi Branham right now, as he is still in the early stages of his rookie year. For De'Aaron Fox, that doesn't imply that I view De'Aaron Fox unfavorably. He's an incredible player. However, if I'm in San Antonio, I'm holding on to those guys. This won't be the first instance where someone aims to join the Spurs to team up with Wemby, whether through free agency or trade. I'm not prepared to part with Steve Castle or Devin Vail in this trade scenario when I have other assets to offer Sacramento. Plus, I realize he wants to be there anyway, hence, if absolutely necessary, I could wait until the 2026 free agency if he truly dislikes the other trade opportunities available. I genuinely believe there are methods for San Antonio to facilitate this trade without sending De'Aaron Vale or Steph Castle to Sacramento. They might possess a different perspective and be open to trading Steve Castle, but personally, I would prefer retaining those two players and proceeding with whatever trade involves Fox without them. If the deal doesn't transpire, I'm fine with waiting. Clearly, Fox desires to be traded before the deadline, and the Kings likely wish to finalize the agreement by then as well, though they're not obligated to. They still have him under contract leading into the 2025 offseason, and by that time, perhaps the situation shifts for San Antonio, allowing them to offer more, or Fox expands his list of preferred teams. By the 2025 offseason, they will still have a year left on Fox's contract, but this doesn't mean the Spurs are the only option. I've certainly noticed some reports about Houston possibly being involved, though there are other reports suggesting they might prefer to retain their current core and keep developing. Brooklyn is a team I brought up yesterday in the video, and it's also been mentioned in several reports today as a potential dark horse due to some of their Kings connections. That remains an option, but the Spurs are still at the forefront. However, there's no assurance that this will occur. This isn't about Luka Doncic or Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's not a genuine MVP-level player being made available to go to San Antonio. This isn't a situation where they are urgently trying to add someone to their lineup. De'Aaron Fox, while very talented and someone I personally believe would be a great fit, doesn't put the Spurs in a position where they urgently need to acquire a player. They are likely to be in contention for many players, but this scenario is intriguing because we usually have bigger market teams involved and multiple organizations vying for players. Yet, Fox finds himself in a distinct position to push specifically to a team that a year and a half ago seemed less appealing to players. Regarding my own forecast, I anticipate it will be a structure akin to what I described earlier, involving draft picks and contracts without Vassell or Steve Curry. I predict this will unfold in the next 5 or 6 days before the trade deadline. There's no genuine reason for this information to leak unless there's an expectation of him being moved. If you're representing De'Aaron Fox and his agency, you'd consider how to avoid making things uncomfortable for him in Sacramento. So, why leak something without believing it's likely to happen? Furthermore, the Kings wouldn't allow this to get out unless they had genuine interest in trading De'Aaron Fox. Additionally, Sacramento might be facing a significant sell-off since Fox is the key young player they have, aside from Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis, and a bit of Keegan Murray. The essential foundational player in Sacramento, the one they aimed to sign to an extension a few months back, is and will always be De'Aaron Fox. Once he departs, it wouldn't shock me if Domantas Sabonis suddenly became a trade option, along with DeMar DeRozan and other players from the Kings. This situation could create a domino effect no matter where De'Aaron Fox ends up. I still believe he may go to the Spurs, but I definitely watch out for other teams, especially if Houston reconsiders some aspects, even if their contracts are somewhat complicated. If Jalen Green or Alperen Sengun were available for trade right now, they're not, as they just signed extensions this past offseason. I think Houston could become a more viable option. However, the situation becomes more complex when those players are unavailable, and while Brooklyn remains a potential option, it presents challenges for them as they are intentionally trying to lose games. Even though we are past the midway point of the season, acquiring De'Aaron Fox would likely impact their lottery chances. Therefore, although I see Brooklyn as a possibility for the 2026 free agency if it progresses that far for Fox, they are probably not inclined to pursue this trade unless circumstances drastically shift with San Antonio. It's a unique and intriguing scenario, albeit unfortunate for Kings fans. The Kings should be able to acquire valuable assets in return for Fox and gain some clarity that has been lacking ever since he opted not to sign the extension a few months back. So, currently, it appears that De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs is highly probable before the trade deadline, which is a week from tomorrow, unless something changes significantly.